Welcome, everybody, to another presentation on the Freedom Absolute channel. I'm here today with Micah Dank. Micah is quite an advanced expert in his knowledge and integration of things esoterica, having to do with astrotheology, the real hidden or inner meanings of the zodiac and the signs and all of that. He's got a lot of expertise of tying that in with the Bible and what's really behind the superficial or the surface layer of the Bible. He has a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to get into in a moment, and we're just going to go with it. Actually, Mike and I just met 5 minutes ago. We saw him 3, 4, 5 weeks ago on Chief Ironbush's channel. If you're not familiar with Chief Ironbush, do a YouTube search for Chief Ironbush, and he's certainly a very important individual for all of you to be aware of and to track his work. In future episodes, we perhaps will have a dialogue with Chief or at least present more of his work for all of your awareness and edification. So Mike and I never met before. We just talked for 5 minutes, said hello, introduced ourselves. I'm quite aware of his work from what we saw in his presentations with Chief. And he's going to do the same presentation here, and we will just improvise. If I have questions or comments, I will do so, and we will go from there. So Micah, welcome. And if you want to give any sort of background, your history of your research and education in these subjects.
Yeah, so I had two mentors really, Santos Bonacci, which I'm not sure many people may or may not
Yes,
know.
yeah, I know Santos.
They know him by the Flat Earth, and Jordan Maxwell, who I was very close with at the end of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Or met him face to face, but I was on the phone with him. I showed him my work. He loved it, which he ties very well into common law, maritime law, all the kind of stuff that you talk about. And we're pulling out of the public into the private sector, um, things of that nature. And I learned astrotheology from both of them, and then I just studied them. I just studied both of them. I bought their DVDs. I read their works. I watched their YouTube videos when they still had them,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually everything started to click, and I started to see things differently. And then one day I just opened the Bible, I started reading it, and I came up with this keyword cipher based on the zodiac, and I was able to trace it. And it's not just the Bible. You mentioned the Bible. Thank you for doing that. But it's not just the Bible. It goes back to the Sumerians that I found, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Jews, Muslims, Christians, the Gnostic texts, the Colburn Bible, the Ethiopian Bible, the Apocrypha, the Book of Mormon, the Quran. I mean, it's in everything. And that's what this presentation is going to show. Now, I'm probably going to do this presentation in two parts, just because I would like to have a dialogue back and forth. If we don't have a dialogue at all, I can zoom through this in 80 minutes.
Okay.
But I think it's better to have a dialogue because
I think we
I
will.
rarely get a host who, at the end of the episodes, the hosts are always like this.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you're exposed to this already. So I want your feedback and I want to be able to have a dialogue. So I think we might split it in two,
Okay.
just so that you can maybe add to it or what have you if you have any questions. But if you would like, I could just get started right away.
Yeah, if you're ready, let's go for it.
All right. So just let me know when you guys can see this because I'm looking at my presentation. I physically can't see you anymore.
Okay. Yep, we got the Holy Bible. These scriptures are metaphysical,
metaphysical, astrological. That's what I'm going to be talking about. Anatomical, alchemical, spiritual, esoteric, and mythology. They're not literal historical. reality or original. The Bible's also a gematria book, an etymology book. I'm going to give you one example of numerology before we start. Symbology and psychedelic are the 12 holy sciences, like the 12 zodiacs, the 12 months in the year, the 12 disciples, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 sons of Joseph. The 12 brothers. It's everything. It's literally telling the same story over and over again. So let me give you, and it's important for you guys to understand that while I am going over this, okay, I am giving you only one not the word installment, that's not the right word. I'm only giving you one metaphysical science within the Bible. I'm only giving you one. So if you ask questions about things that are missing or outside of things that I've explained, it could be metaphysical, it could be anatomical, it could be alchemical, it could be all of this stuff. It could be some of this stuff. We might actually be able to break this down into 3 segments because I have a second presentation that I've started debuting, and I'm going to debut it on Chief Ironbush tomorrow. Well, we actually went through half of it. So I'm going to do the second half with Chief Ironbush tomorrow. So it's basically like a 3 or 4-part series.
Mm-hmm.
So John 21:11. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish. 153. You know the fish are Pisces, right? The 2 fish.
Mm-hmm.
But even with so many, the net was not torn. So this right here that you're looking at is the Vesica Pisces, what I've highlighted right here. It's the womb. It's the chalice, too. It is 2 overlapping circles. It's a Venn diagram. But it's called the Vesica Pisces. Pisces is 2 fish. So where are the 2 fish? Well, in order to find the 2 fish, all you really need to do is make a slight adjustment to this. And you'll get the symbol that Christians use on their cars all the time. There's 1 fish, and here's the 2nd fish. Now, the mathematical equation for this center right here is 265 over the 153. So the 153 has been embedded in here. It's a mystical number. But this is just an example of numerology, and I am not going to go further than that. I just wanted to show you, hey, guys, numerology is part of it, etymology, gematria. So now let's start getting into the astrological, where we're going to reside. Now, before I start this, by the time I'm halfway done with this presentation, you guys are going to see and understand the patterns. You might not remember all the key words, but you'll definitely be like, yeah, I remember him saying that, and he explained it to me, and it made sense. That's all I need you guys to do. You guys don't need to memorize this right away. I'm going to take you on a journey. But the thing is that I want to explain to you what the purpose, why they did this, why they encoded this book astrologically. So, what is the point of this? We take for granted we have calendars, clocks, watches, weathermen. The ancients didn't have any of that. They had sundials. It's true. In the Bible, they worked on dream interpretations for harvest. That's the story of Joseph when he goes to the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh's like, I dreamt about 7 fat cows and 7 skinny cows, and I don't know what's going to happen. That's what they did because they didn't have calendars, clocks, watches, or weathermen, meteorology. They had to know things. They needed to know that Taurus was when you put the plow on the bull and you plant as above, so below. Astrologically or astrotheologically, the slice that is astrotheological in the Bible is an encoded farmer's almanac and was the knowledge of staying alive, the most important thing. They would look at the stars and see all this movement and make stories up about them and pass them down to their children, then them to their children, etc. Eventually, they learned how to write, and they wrote them down, and they evolved from Sumerian to Babylonian to Egyptian to Judaism in the Old Testament, then the Christians in the New Testament, then to the Muslims in the Quran, to the Book of Mormon. Every time a new holy book comes out, again, a Northern Hemisphere Western text that becomes holy comes out. It's always littered with this. So this quote right here, which I'm going to read to you, you're going to get familiar with because I put it in like 5 times. My point, once again, is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. That's John Dominic Cresson. So this is the zodiac, guys. And what I want to show you is just a couple of patterns, okay? Taurus is the bull. So this is Taurus. If you want to make a pattern with Taurus, Gemini is the twins. You can go to its next sign over. It's known as its connecting sign. Or Aries, the ram. This is known as its connecting sign. So Taurus is the bull. And then these are the two connecting signs. The other pattern you can do is you can go across the zodiac or count 6 signs after, and it takes you to Scorpio. This is its opposing sign. And these are the kind of patterns I'm going to show. I'm going to show opposing signs and connecting signs so that you know that it is what it is. You're never going to have like Leo the lion and Pisces the fish. They're never going to talk about the lion and the fish together. The other thing I want to show you is that right here, this line right here that you see that I'm highlighting right here, this doesn't exist. If I'm looking out at the sky, it doesn't separate the sky. It separates the zodiac sign. These lines are what is called a cusp or a handover date. Those are the names for them. What it is it's the last, for example, the last one I did here, this is the last 3 days of Libra and the first 3 days of Scorpio. The energies blend into each other. So you always hear when somebody's a cusp, oh, I have a little bit of Virgo in me, or I have a little bit of this. That's because it's a real science, and they blend. It's important to note the degrees. So what I wanted to show you was the opposing sign, the connecting sign, and these right here. Now, the other thing too is right here, Taurus and Gemini. Gemini is the twins. If I'm in Gemini and I'm talking about the twins, I can only talk about the twins. If I'm in Taurus and I'm talking about the bull, I can only talk about the bull. However, if I am here at the cusp of the story, and I'll teach you how to read with the zodiac too, I could talk about either the bull or the twins. So that's what I wanted to show you. Now, there's questions you can ask in the Bible. How Jesus was able to heal the blind, how he walked on water, how he turned water into wine, why he had 12 disciples, why he was betrayed with a kiss by Judas, why he was dead for 3 days, why is his birthday on December 25th. Now, all that is astrology, and we'll get back to that, and I'll answer all those questions shortly. Genesis 1:14, let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night, the sun and the moon. Let them be signs, that's the zodiac, to mark the seasons, days, and years. Again, the Farmer's Almanac, Genesis 1:14, literally tells you what I'm about to show you. So, each zodiac sign is called a house, or an era, or an eon, or a sign, or a mansion. There are many different words used to describe it, but it's all words that are used within a story. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain the 12 signs of the zodiac to you. I'm going to give you the keywords in each sign, and you'll agree with the keywords because they're going to have to do with the signs. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take all those keywords and we're going to find patterns in these ancient holy texts. And I'm talking lots of patterns. So the reason I start with Aquarius is because Aquarius and Pisces are both water. That's what they are. And I'll explain that. I'll explain the Aquarius first. The first sign I talk about is Aquarius, which is represented by the man. Now, technically, Aries begins the year, but Aquarius is closer to our beginning of the year, which is January 1st, December 31st at midnight. So I start with Aquarius. Now, the story of Aquarius goes back to the story of Zeus and the young boy, which basically goes like this. Zeus saw a 14-year-old blonde boy on Earth that he wanted in heaven. Now, he wanted him in heaven, or actually, technically, he wanted him on Mount Olympus, which they considered heaven. Incidentally, Mount Olympus is actually a real place on Earth. It is actually a real mountain. And none of the Greeks ever thought to go up there to see if Zeus was up there partying. None of them did. But nonetheless, he wants the boy. The boy's father won't let him go, so he bargains with the boy's father. He gives him a whole bunch of stuff, and finally the boy's father's like, well, it is Zeus. He could kind of squish me if he wanted to, so all right, go. Anyway, he takes the boy up to Mount Olympus, or to heaven, and in there he's feeding everybody out of this water pitcher in the picture, something called ambrosia, which is the nectar the gods used to drink. Now it's just a tangerine whipped cream salad, but back in the day, it used to actually have some significance. It's what the gods sustained on. And he's pouring these drinks out of this water pitcher for them day in and day out, day in and day out. And one day he just gets so fed up with the monotony and the nonsense of it. He's like, I'm 14 years old. Why am I doing this? So he goes to the edge of Mount Olympus, and he pours it out like in this picture. And this causes a flood on Earth. That's where the Greeks get their flood story from. Now, Zeus, who's usually a malevolent, kind of sexually deviant, unpredictable, just a dick, basically, kind of god, in a moment of self-reflection, he was going to punish him. But in a moment of self-reflection, he was like, yeah, I kind of bought the boy to come up here. He's 14. He left his friends. He left his family. And you know what? I'm not going to punish him. Instead, what he does is he immortalizes him as the constellation Aquarius right here. So the keywords would be man, because Aquarius is the sign of the man, whereas Virgo is the sign of the woman. Baptism, because this is how you baptize someone. You just put somebody right here, a baby or a confused adult, and pour the water, and they get baptized. Water pitcher, because this is a water pitcher. Stream, river, pond, lake, ocean, sea. Now, Aquarius is an air sign, whereas Pisces is a water sign, if you know astrology. But because right here, there's liquid, there's basically water in this picture, they used it to describe water situations. Now, Pisces being the two fish in the water, stream, river, pond, lake, sea, ocean, it's the same thing. But the way that you figure out whether it's Aquarius water or Pisces water has to do with the words that they use. And I promise you, I'll give you an example of that. So the first two are water. That's why I started with Aquarius, because I wanted to show the first two. Now, Aries is the ram. And in Aries, you have March 21st, which is the spring equinox. It's a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night. It's also the Passover. There's 3 Passovers that occur in Aries. The first and the oldest is the astrological Passover. This is when the sun literally passes over on March 21st, the equator, and starts to make its way back up to its height in the summer solstice in the summer. In Judaism, the Passover is when the angel of death passes over all the houses, and all the houses have to put the lamb or the ram's blood smeared on their doorpost. Why? Because the Jews are the people of Aries. The Egyptians are the people of Taurus. That's why they always have hieroglyphs with the bull with the horns, with the sun between its horns. Whereas the Jews are the people of Aries. That's why they blow the ram's horn during the holidays, because it's a ram. We'll get into more of that later. But so that's it. Anyone that doesn't have the blood of the ram or the lamb on the doorpost, their firstborn son get killed. The firstborn son getting killed is a motif that you see all the time, and it has to do with the sun in the sky, which we'll get to. In Christianity, this Passover is changed and it becomes the resurrection of God's son. This takes place in Aries every time. Now, how do you know? Well, if you want to know, the resurrection of God's son, Jesus being the son, which we'll explain in great detail, way better than Zeitgeist ever could. But what you want to know about this is that Easter, which is the resurrection, is astrological too, because you have the March 21st, you have the astrological Passover. Then after the sun passes over the equator, you have to have a first full moon. And then after the first full moon, you have to have the first Sunday after the first full moon, after March 21st. And that is Easter every year. You can literally figure that out, and then you can figure out Easter for the next 2,000 years. So there's 3 different types of Passover. So the words would be ram, lamb, shepherd, or ram's horn. Now, Taurus is the bull. And when you look at the sky and you see Taurus during the season where it's supposed to be, it's literally as above, so below. If I look up in the sky and I see the bull, I know I have to put the plow on the bull on Earth. Now, we have John Deere equipment that does that now. We don't really, in fact, we have AI that does it now. We have robots that do this now. But back in the day, they needed the bull so that you can plant the seed so you can harvest in Virgo and Libra. So whenever you hear bull, ox, calf, or cow being the female bull, that's Taurus. Then Gemini is the twins. It's the story of Castor and Pollux Troy. Remember those names. We're going to get back to them later. Castor and Pollux Troy are Gemini, the twins, whose sister was Helen of Troy. It's the story of Achilles, another Greek story. So whenever you hear twins or brothers, they're talking about Gemini. Then Cancer is the crab. The crab in the ancient Egyptian times was known as the scarab. So whenever you hear crab or beetle, that's Cancer. The Egyptian times, the zodiac, instead of the crab for Cancer, was the scarab. But let me show you why it's the crab now. So what you have here is the zodiac. Now, this is summer, fall, winter, and spring. This is the cardinal points. This is the first sign in each season. Now, what happens is on December 25th down here, the sun is going to rise a degree. This is not to scale, by the way. I'm just showing you what's happening. Every day, the sun is going to rise an additional degree on its axis. When it makes its way all the way to the top in Cancer, that's June 21st. That's the longest day of the year, the shortest night of the year. That's when the sun is at its height. Then what it does is for 3 consecutive days, it's not going to rise another degree or drop a degree. What it does is it walks sideways, which is why Cancer is the crab, because the sun walks sideways. The crab walks sideways. It's a metaphorical explanation for it. June 25th, the sun drops a degree. June 26th, an additional degree. Now the reverse pattern happens. And then it's going to pass under the equator, and then it's going to make its way to winter, cold, death. When it hits December 21st, that's the day of death. When he hits December 21st, that's the day of death. That is the winter solstice. That is when the sun is at its lowest point. It cannot rise any lower. The ancients used to look out into the sky, and they would say that the sun was dead because it wouldn't crack the horizon. If you've ever seen a time lapse of a picture of the sun rising every single day, it makes a figure 8. And the edges are the solstices, and the middle part is the equinox because it touches the middle twice. But if you're looking at the solstice, the winter solstice, it's down at the bottom. It doesn't cross the horizon. So the ancients said God's sun was dead. Then it's going to walk sideways like the crab for 3 days again. So now suddenly God's sun was dead for 3 days. Where on December 25th, or the birth of all the gods, it comes back to life. It's born again. The risen Savior, the light of the world, the only begotten Son, comes back to life. So that's Cancer. So crab or beetle, because remember the Egyptian, it wasn't the crab, it was the scarab. So Leo is the king. He's the lion, he's the king of the jungle or the king of the savannah. The ruling planet of Leo is actually the sun. So whenever you're talking about lion, lioness, or cub, that's Leo. Virgo is the woman holding the wheat stalk, which I'm going to highlight right here. Look, it's the virgin holding the stalk of wheat. Why? Because this is harvest season. The virgins would go out and cultivate the wheat in Virgo in order to make the bread for the year. So whenever you hear virgin or woman, because Virgo is the sign of the woman, whereas Aquarius is the sign of the man, wheat, grain, seed, barley, corn, these are all grainy things that in the northern hemisphere 2,000 years ago were harvested during Virgo. In fact, before the new year was in Aries, in the Egyptian times, the new year was actually in Virgo. So what happens is the sun would come to an end in Leo in its home, because the sun rules Leo, and then a brand new son would be born to a virgin, and they would harvest, and they would celebrate the harvest. So Libra is the justice. It's the scales, it's the balance, it's the just one. The reason it's the justice is because it judges God's sun as it passes over, or technically passes under, the fall equinox and begins its descent into winter, into cold, into death. The Jews always celebrate the new year around the fall equinox. So in 2023, and I could do this for any year, but I just remember 2023, the Jewish New Year was September 15th, which is Virgo, which goes back to the Jewish roots in Egypt. That was the Jewish New Year. But 10 days after the Jewish New Year, and it's always 10 days after, there's a Jewish holiday called Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, or the Day of Judgment. Well, you add 10 days to September 15th, that's September 25th. You're in Libra right now. That's the cusp of Libra Virgo. The scales. Of course, the Day of Judgment has to happen in Libra. It all follows suit this way. So whenever you hear law, judge, justice, the just one, divorce, marriage, court, all lawly things, that's Libra. Libra is also wine and olive oil season. So whenever you hear grapes, vineyard, wine press, wine, olive oil, that's Libra. So just so that we're clear, Libra is all law-related things, all wine-related things, and all olive-related things. Scorpio is the scorpion and he is the betrayer. When a scorpion bites you or stings you, it leaves an imprint in your skin that looks like a pair of lips, and it's why the mafia has the kiss of death. It's why Jesus was betrayed by Judas with a kiss. So the sun is judged in Libra and it's betrayed in Scorpio. Finally, in Sagittarius, this is where the bow and the arrow shoot the sun and inflict further punishment on the sun. This is where the sun dies. I explained it to you. December 21st, the last day of Sagittarius, is the first day of winter. So whenever you hear horse, bow and arrow, or horseman, that's Sagittarius. And then finally you have Capricorn, which is the goat. So if the sun, if you're watching again, it's climbing a degree a day. It's starting December 25th to climb a degree a day. It starts the climb up what is known as the Great Mountain, which is the zodiac. The zodiac is called the Great Mountain. And it starts the climb in Capricorn. And the reason it starts the climb in Capricorn is because Capricorn is the goat. Why is Capricorn the goat? Because the mountain goat starts the climb up the mountain better than any animal out there. So those are the 12 signs of the zodiac. Do you have anything that you want to add or any questions before I continue?
No, that's a good start. Very clear.
All right. Okay. Now, there are names for Jesus that he's given in church that are all astrology, but the church congregation have no clue. Jesus is the sun. That's why the sun is behind his head in every picture. Even baby Jesus, even adult Jesus. This isn't a halo. It's very clearly the sun. Now, when the sun, or Jesus, is in Capricorn, the goat, he is called the scapegoat of Israel. When the sun is in the man sign, Aquarius, he is called the Son of Man. When the sun, or Jesus, is in Pisces, the two fish, he's the fisher of men. And it's also why he feeds the masses with two fish. We'll get to that. When the sun is in the ram, or Aries, he is the Lamb of God, or the Good Shepherd. Cancer, the scarab, remember the crab, the scarab beetle in Egypt times?
Mm-hmm.
St. Augustine famously called Jesus the good beetle. When the sun is in Leo, he is the Lion of Judah. The lady holding the stalk of wheat, he is born of a virgin, and he's called the bread of life. Libra is the scales of justice. He is known as the just one. Then he's betrayed in Scorpio. He dies in Sagittarius on December 21st, and it's why he's worshipped on the Sunday. So what I want to do now is start going into scripture. He gave them honey from the cliffs and olive oil from the rocky ground. This is Deuteronomy 32. He gave his people butter from the herd and milk from the flock. He gave them lambs and goats. They had the best rams from Bashan and the finest wheat. They drank the best wine made from the juice of red grapes. But Jeshurun became fat and kicked like a bull. So let me explain the honey and the milk. Okay? The honey. This is the first day of right here. This is the first day of summer. This is the beginning of Cancer. The first day of Cancer is the first day of summer. In Cancer, there's a group of stars, a tight-knit group of stars, like I just plotted right here, called the Beehive Cluster. So that's where the honey comes from. If you actually trace the Beehive Cluster back, it used to actually be called the Manger. So go figure. Now, the milk, this right here, if you continue this all the way down, this right here is the first day of winter. This is the last day of Sagittarius. In Sagittarius, you have the Milky Way galaxy, or the center of the Milky Way galaxy. So what this is telling you is from the first day of summer all the way to the first day of winter is your land of milk and honey. It's not a place on earth. It is a place in the heavens. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to mark Cancer and we're going to mark Sagittarius. So, next. Olive oil from the rocky grounds. Well, the olive oil is Libra. He gave them lambs and goats. Well, the lambs are Aries, and the goat is Capricorn. They had the best rams, that's Aries, from Bashan, and the finest wheat. Well, the wheat is Virgo, the lady with the wheat stalk. They drank the best wine made from the juice of red grapes. Well, that's Libra. But Jeshurun became fat and kicked like a bull. That's Taurus. So just in Deuteronomy 32, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 signs out of the 12. Now look, this is a pattern right here. They're connecting signs. Here's the second connecting sign. Here's the third connecting sign. So what this is this is teaching you the heavens, and it's teaching you where things are. And it's teaching you what connects to what sign means what, and what you're supposed to do with it. Now, if I were to go to the Mount of Olives, I'm going to show you how you do this with the zodiac wheel. Now, Jesus led his disciples, let me highlight this for you, to the Mount of Olives. So let me highlight olives after his last Passover, so that he could teach them a few more things, pray, then wait for Judas to betray him. While walking to the Mount of Olive, he gave the parable of the true vine. So Aries is here, and I'm sorry, Passover is here in Aries. Where what does he do? He walks to the Mount of Olives after Passover. Well, the olives are Libra. That's the opposing sign. Now you're in Libra. While you're in Libra, they're waiting for Judas to betray him. Well, the betrayer is the Scorpion, remember? So that's an opposing sign and a connecting sign. But you're not in Scorpio right now because they're saying they're waiting for Judas to betray him. So you got to check the words that they use. So because you're not in Scorpio, even though you just made 2 patterns, you're still in Libra. While you're in Libra, he gives the parable of the true vine. The vine has to do with the grapes, which has to do with Libra. So this is how you use the zodiac to read this. Now, Revelation 4:7. The first living creature was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had a face like a man. The fourth was like a flying eagle. The first living creature was like a lion, that's Leo. The second was like an ox, that's Taurus. The third had a face like a man, that's Aquarius. The fourth was like a flying eagle. Now, in astrology, the Scorpio scorpion is the belly crawling creature. It's the lowest form of life on Earth because it crawls on its belly. In the Garden of Eden, after the deception with the snake, the first thing God does is not kick Adam and Eve out. The first thing he does is take the legs away from the snake so it has to slither on its belly. In Mexico, during Santo de la Muerte, men dress up in suits and they get on their hands and knees and they crawl on their belly to church. It's a punishment. It's a low form of life. But the eagle is the highest flying form of life on Earth. That's known as the ascendant in astrology. The eagle will also evolve into the phoenix. It'll also evolve into the dove. There's 8 evolutions of Scorpio, which for this presentation itself is not entirely needed, except maybe the dove part. So you have, just example, Scorpio, scorpion, eagle, phoenix, dove. And what is the story of the phoenix? It's the same thing, the story of Christ, the sun. It's a flaming ball of life that metaphorically dies in its own ashes, and then it's born back to life. It's born again. So Leo, Taurus, Aquarius, and Scorpio are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, you have 12 zodiac signs, and you have 4 seasons. So there's 3 signs in each season. This is the first sign of summer, fall, winter, spring. These are known as the cardinal signs. That's why there's cardinals in church. Any of these 12 zodiac signs, you can actually take them and cut them into 3 10-day segments, and they're called deacons, which is why there are deacons and cardinals in church, because it's astrology. So this is the cardinal sign. This is the fixed sign, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus. And if you connect them, you'll see it makes a nice little pattern. These are opposing signs. These are opposing signs. The third sign is the mutable sign. The reason it's called the fixed is because there's 3 signs. So this is summer, okay? And Leo is in the middle. That's why it's the fixed sign, because it's the dead of the season. Leo's the dead of summer, Scorpio fall, Aquarius winter, and Taurus the spring. So with that being said, look at this pattern that it makes. So people are either going to believe that there's going to be a four-headed living creature. I mean, if people take Revelation literally, which we'll get into, because I'm going to go through the book of Revelation with you. The first living creature was like a lion, ox, man, eagle. I mean, it just makes this pattern in the zodiac. Or there's going to be a four-headed creature coming down. They show you this in Ezekiel 10:14 too, and it's no different than Ezekiel's vision, which I can get into a different presentation and show you Ezekiel's vision. Each of the cherubim had four faces. One face was that of a cherub, the second the face of a human being, the third the face of a lion, the fourth the face of an eagle. Revelation 12. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its head. That's the numerology part of the Bible, which we're not getting into. I just wanted to show you that I'm going to skip that part because that's for a different breakdown. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to earth. So, a woman clothed with the sun is the sun clothed in Virgo. It's a metaphor for the sun being in Virgo. If the sun is in Virgo, the moon will be at her feet. So, we're looking for Virgo now, right? Okay, so let me show you this real quick. This zodiac is also a clock. So there's 12 signs. There's 24 hours a day in each day. So each sign spends 2 hours a day. And the sun spends 2 hours a day in each sign. This is from 12 to 2. This is 2 to 4. 4 to 6. 6 to 8. 8 to 10. 10 to 12. 12 to 2. 2 to 4. 4 to 6. Right here, because we were looking for Virgo. So 4 to 6. Now, if it's between 4 and 6 p.m., like, I mean, it's 6:48 right now, but if I look outside, you see the sun still there, right? So if the sun is in Virgo, the moon will be at our feet, because if the sun is up, the moon is at our feet. Not literally, we know that, but it's a metaphor. If the sun is up, the moon is down. If the moon is up, the sun is down. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous dragon. This is Draco, the dragon, the constellation. It goes from Aries to Sagittarius, the tail does, which I just highlighted right here, which is 4/12 of the signs, or 1/3 of the stars out of the sky. This is star poetry that people don't know how to read. Now, Matthew 10:16. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of the wolves. Well, sheep are Aries right here. And the constellation Lupus is in Libra, the opposing sign of Aries. So there's a pattern right there. So be as wise as serpents. So the serpent is Ophiuchus, or the constellation Serpens, which is the snake. And that's between Scorpio and Sagittarius. And be harmless as doves. Well, the dove is the evolution of Scorpio. So this one right here, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. You get an opposing sign and then 1, 2, 3 connecting signs in a row. Example, too, let me show you this real quick. Right here is where Ophiuchus is. That's in sidereal Vedic astrology. Ophiuchus the sun does not flip through it during the ecliptic. But it's used for the other kind of astrology. What you need to know about this is that Ophiuchus is a man holding a basket, and there's a snake in the basket. The snake is facing right here, Sagittarius, which is the man on the horse. So there's a scripture in the Bible, in the book of, I believe it's the book of Dan, or if it's not in the book of Dan, it's talking about Dan, which says Dan will become a serpent, and he will bite the heel of the horse, because remember, Ophiuchus is facing Sagittarius. So the snake head is facing Sagittarius, so the snake head is just going to take a chunk out of the horse, and then the rider will fall off. So I've given examples of astrotheology in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. I've been accused of cherry-picking verses from the Bible to prove a point. So let's take a much longer passage and see if we could decode it as well. So this brings us to the book of Job. Are you familiar with the book of Job?
Mhm.
I'm sorry?
Yeah,
Can you explain to everybody who Job was and what the story, the moral, and what they're trying to show you?
that's a good question. Basically, God considered Job one of his most upright and righteous servants and above and beyond reproach. And the devil came along and said, well, look at Job. He has all of the abundance of the earth. He has a family, a wife, children, sons. He's got a land that's productive. The land is very productive and fertile. He's got animals. So the devil bets God that he can prove that the Job's righteousness is only because of the abundance, and if he takes away all of that, he will show that Job is not faithful to God. So
Mhm.
God says, "Okay, I will give you to it," and they make a bet essentially. So the devil begins to take everything away from Job. He takes away the fertility of the land, his crops fail. It causes him financial trouble. He loses his wife, he loses his son. He starts having physical health problems. His animals die, and each successive step. Now, keep in mind, it's 50 years since I've read the book of Job.
No, no, you're doing an
Um,
incredible. You're doing a better job than I would.
Okay. Actually, in 12th grade, I think it was 12th grade in high school, I took a class called The Bible is Literature. And that was one of the books that we studied as literature. And also then in college, I studied Jungian psychology. And Jung, are you familiar with Carl Jung and his work?
Yeah, more than I'd like to, but yeah,
So Jung wrote a book called The Answer to Job. Do you recall that?
I never read it.
Yeah. Well, I read it 50 years ago, 48 years ago, so I can't go into the detail. I just remember that it was a psychological analysis of the story of Job and took it out of the religious context. But that's all I can tell you about it. Um,
Mhm.
but anyways, it goes along and Job retains his faith and his belief in God and his servitude to God, and he doesn't bend or break to all the privations that occur because of the acts of the devil. Um, and essentially, that's all I remember of it. I'm sure there is a
No,
if.
that's absolutely perfect. So, what I want to tell you guys is based off of everything that you just heard, there comes a moment where he's just sitting on he's basically sitting on the grass or he's sitting on the floor with boils. He's like on a rock and he's crying out to God for about like 20 pages in the Bible. It just goes on and on and on. And then God replies to him. What I'm going to read you is God's reply. Okay. So the first thing in Job 38:32, can you lead forth the Mazaroth? The Mazaroth is literally the zodiac. It's intentionally untranslated because they don't want you to know what that means. Mazaroth over time becomes the Mazalot, which survives in Judaism today as Mazel Tov, which is good fortune from the stars. That's what Mazel Tov means, good fortune from the stars. So, what is the Lord's challenge to Job? He says, can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Those are open celestial metaphors. Now, the Pleiades are in Taurus. Orion's belt is between Taurus and Gemini. Then he says, can you bring forth the constellation in their season or lead out the bear with its cubs? The constellations are the zodiac above, and the bear and its cubs are Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Ursa Minor, part of the Big Dipper. That's between Gemini and Cancer. Well, guess what? Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer are three zodiac signs in a row. Who can tip over the water jars of heavens? That's Aquarius. Literally, that's literally Aquarius. He's tipping over the water jar. Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy a hunger for the lions? That's Leo. Well, guess what? Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo are 4 signs in a row. So just the beginning of his challenge. You have Aquarius right here, and you have a pattern of 4 signs right here. That's just a start. But it goes on. Who provides food for the raven? That's the constellation Corvus, which means raven and borders on Virgo. Do you watch where the doe bears her fawn? That's Mariga, meaning deer, and is located in Orion. Who let the wild donkey go free? That's Acellus borealis, meaning donkey, and is located in Cancer. Will the wild ox consent to serve you? That's Taurus. Do you give the horse its strength? So they mentioned the horse, so we know it's the horse. And who's the horse? That's Sagittarius. But if you keep reading, it laughs at fear, afraid of nothing. It does not shy away from the sword. The quiver, see, they mentioned the quiver. The quiver is that little thing that sits on the side of the horse that holds the arrows. So the man with the bow and the arrow, or the man with the bow, can grab the arrows. So it's Sagittarius with the bow and the arrow. Does the eagle soar at your command and build its nest on high? The eagle is Scorpio, evolved. Then he says, can you pull on Leviathan with a fish hook? That's Pisces. Leviathan is an ancient fish god, like Mithra, like Dagon. There were a ton of competing Piscean fish deities in the age of Pisces, which we're leaving right now. So anyway, that was his challenge. And you have this pattern right here. You have this pattern right here. And you have these 5 right here. So the only thing that God didn't mention, he didn't mention Aries, right? So he didn't mention the lamb or the ram or the shepherd. He didn't mention Libra, so there was no wine, law, or olives. He didn't mention the goat. But if you see here, this makes a very interesting pattern. I always do this. Hold on. The pattern in the ones that are missing. Makes an upside down triangle. I've been looking into that, trying to figure out how that fits in, but 9 out of 12 signs. So, how Jesus was able to heal the blind. So, the story goes that the blind man came up to Jesus and said, please heal me. I have all the faith in the world. And Jesus said, oh, you do have all the faith in the world. I will heal you, because of your faith and everything. So he grabs the dirt and he spits on his fingers and grabs the dirt, and then he puts it on the man's eyes, and then when the dirt falls off, he's able to see. But metaphorically, we do the same thing right now. See, in about an hour, when I look outside and the sun goes down, I'm going to be blind. I'm not going to, unless there's outside light, I'm not going to be able to see a thing. I'm going to be blind. So what has to happen is the sun has to touch my eyes in the morning in order for me to see again. How he walked on water. Well, we know the story about how Jesus walks on water, but the sun does that too. So Jesus walks on water, the sun walks on water. If you've ever gone fishing, you ever been on a boat before and you see the sunset or something, you can see the sun walking on the water or during sunrise. And the Jews wrote the New Testament in Greek, and Christ, or Christos, was his title. It's not a last name, it's a title. It means oil or anointed one. Well, doesn't oil also walk on water? So you have the sun walking on water, Jesus walking on water, and Christ, or the anointed oil, also walking on water. This is a triple entendre right here. How he turned water into wine, this is not a parlor trick, this is a process. So think back to what I told you already. The reason God is considered a man and Mother Earth is considered a woman has to do with one thing, and it has to do with the rain, the sacred fluid. What happens is, you have to think about it like this, is that God's sacred fluid, the Hebrew word is shemen. We get the word semen from it. I mean, it's right there. It's so obvious. What happens is God's rain, God basically ejaculates onto earth, the sacred fluid. And then from her belly, trees grow, food grows, animals can get fed, plants, grass, everything grows. She produces life. So what happens is, you have Taurus, you see the bull in the sky, you put the plow in the bull, you plant the grape seeds, and then it's April showers bring May flowers. That's Taurus. It's always been like that. And then it rains and it rains and it rains and it rains. And then in September or October during Libra, you pick the grapes and you turn it into wine. That's how you turn God's water into wine. It's a process. Why he had 12 disciples? Let me show you that real quick. Oop. Okay. So let me show you that real quick. Gemini, right here, Thomas Didymus. Because in Hebrew, ta'om or Tom means twin. Didymus in Greek means twin. Libra is James. He's known as the just one. That has to do with the law or honor. Scorpio is Judas the betrayer, because that's what the scorpion does. Aquarius in the 13th sign, where you'd have John the Baptist baptizing everyone. You have Pisces right here. As my mentor Santos Bonacci talks about Pisces in this specific case, I'll quote him. Simon Peter doesn't make sense. Jonathan goes to John, Thomas goes to Tom, Michael goes to Mike. Simon to Peter doesn't make sense unless you understand astrology. So Simon's job was a fisherman. So the fish are Pisces. So we know that it's Pisces because his job was a fisherman. Well, the ruling planet of Pisces is Jupiter or Jupiter. So that's Pisces, Aquarius, Scorpio, Libra, and Gemini. I just gave you 5 examples of the disciples, and each of them tell a story that belongs to this sort of lore of the 12 zodiac signs being the 12 disciples. Why he was betrayed with a kiss by Judas, we went over that. Why was he dead for 3 days? We went over that. Why is his birthday on December 25th? We went over that. I told you I'd go over it. Now, this science only works for people in the northern hemisphere, and there is a reason for that. The Egyptians, Jews, Christians, and Muslims are all based out of the northern hemisphere. For example, June 21st, the summer solstice, is actually the winter solstice in Australia and New Zealand, much of South Africa and South America. So you still would use in the southern hemisphere the zodiac like this, but let me explain it to you like this. Taurus right here, this is the bull. This is as above, so below. You see the bull, you put the plow on the bull. This is in the northern hemisphere. If you wanted to know when you actually plant the seeds, all you have to do is get a picture of the zodiac wheel and go to its opposing sign, because they're inverted in the southern hemisphere. This is Scorpio. Scorpio is when you would treat as if Taurus. Virgo is the harvest season. But if you are in the southern hemisphere, its opposing sign is Pisces. That's when you would actually do it. So I hope that makes sense. So this doesn't stop there. It's not just random passages in the Bible that can be decoded this way. Let me go through the entire book of Revelation. It's not that long to show how deep this runs. So Revelation 4:7, the first living creature was like a lion. We did this already. This is known as the tetramorph, the 4 fixed signs. We did this already, so I'm going to skip it. Revelation 5:5. Then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. Well, the Lion of Judah is Leo. The ruling planet of Leo is the sun. So they're talking about Christ being able to open the scrolls and the 7 seals. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures, again, the fixed signs, Revelation 4:7, say in a voice like thunder, come. Well, the Lamb is Aries, and of course the Lamb has to open the first of the 7 seals. Why? Because Lamb is Aries, and Aries begins the year. So, of course, this has to open the first one because it starts the year off. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures, again, I'm going to refer to the first living creature was like a lion, the second was like an ox, the third had a face like a man, the fourth was like a flying eagle. Moving forward, I'm going to refer to it as the tetramorph because that's what it's actually called. So the 4 living creatures is the tetramorph, say in a voice like thunder. In Hebrew, the word for thunder is actually translates to voices. So when they heard thunder, they used to think God was talking. And that makes sense if you think of the story about Moses going up to Mount Sinai, which I'll get to at some point. Revelation 6:2. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow. Well, who's the horse with the bow and arrow? That's Sagittarius. I mean, they're throwing it in your face, basically. Then I heard what sounded like a voice of the 4 living creatures, again, the tetramorph, saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. Well, guess what? The wheat and the barley is Virgo, and the oil and the wine are both Libra. So this is two examples of Virgo, two examples of Libra. Virgo and Libra are connecting signs. I watched as he opened the sixth seal. There was a giant earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair, and the whole moon turned blood red. Well, the reason they say this like this, what am I on, 48? Okay. This is Capricorn right here. This is the goat. Its opposing sign is Cancer. Cancer's ruling planet is the moon. So you have to understand astrology. They're teaching you astrology here. But that's why they put the goat hair and the moon turned blood red. That's why they affect one another, because they're connected that way. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. There are 7 chakras. The root has 4 petals, the sacral has 6, the solar plexus has 10, the heart has 12, and the throat has 16, which equals 48. The third eye chakra is represented by 96 and only has 2 petals because it's 2 times as powerful as the lower chakras. So 48 times 2 equals 96. The crown chakra is 1,000 times more powerful than the lower 6 chakras. When you add the lower 6, you get 96 plus 48 equals 144. You times that by 1,000 for the crown chakra. You get your 144,000. What it's trying to tell you is not that there's a fixed amount of people going to heaven to see God. What it's telling you is when you've activated all your chakras, that's when you get to go see God, and it's a gift for everyone. Revelation 9:3. And out of the smoke, locusts came down on the earth and were given power like that over scorpions on the earth. So we're going to see in about 5 minutes how locusts, Leviticus 11, are a food source. So that's how it's good. But what's the scorpion do? What is the power of the scorpion? Well, it betrays. That's what it does. That's what the scorpion does. It's a betrayer. So how does locusts become betrayers? Well, they're a food source in a small amount, but in a large amount they're a plague. So that's how they can quickly become a betrayer. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. So that's Sagittarius. On their heads, they wore something like crowns of gold. That's the golden sun. That's Sagittarius, the sun in Sagittarius. Their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had tails with stingers like scorpions. So Sagittarius, the sun in Sagittarius, Virgo, Leo, and Scorpio. Virgo and Leo are connecting signs. Sagittarius and Scorpio are connecting signs. Then we have Revelation 12. That's the dragon, which we're going to skip because we did that already. Revelation 13:2 is short. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. I didn't get to this point yet, but there is a constellation in Gemini called Camelopardalis. It's a combination of 2 words, camelos, which means camel, and pardalis, which means leopard, the camel leopard. The giraffe's original name was Camelopardalis because they didn't know what else to call it when they saw this thing with spots that was big and lanky like a camel. So they called it the camel leopard. So Ursa Major is in Cancer, the lion is Leo. So the leopard is Gemini, the bear is Ursa Major in Cancer, and the lion is Leo. That's 3 signs in a row in this sentence, this one sentence. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. So the lamb is Aries, and the dragon begins in Aries. So this is actually talking about Aries, or the dragon being Draco. Cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense. I didn't get into this yet, but myrrh and frankincense, by the way, that the wise men bring, myrrh and frankincense are olive plants. I don't know if you knew that, but olives are Libra. The wine is also Libra. The olive oil is also Libra. Flour and wheat, that's Virgo. Libra and Virgo are connecting signs. The cattle is Taurus. The sheep is Aries. Taurus and Aries are connecting signs. Horses, that's Sagittarius. And the human beings, sold as slaves. So there's just a million different patterns. So my point, once again, is not that those ancient people told literal stories, and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically, and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. So that's the book of Revelation. It's not so scary, is it?
Nope, never scared me.
Okay. I just need a sec.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the deep dive into the book of Matthew. And then after that's it, I think we'll pause.
Okay.
Spot to pause. Actually, hold on. Let me see. No, no. We'll continue a few more slides. I want to show you some more stuff. Okay, so deep dive into the book of Matthew. Matthew 3:2. Repent of your sins and turn to God, for the kingdom of heaven is near. Each gospel begins at one of the four major points of the zodiac. That's if these are the cardinal signs. That's summer, fall, winter, spring. The two solstices and the two equinoxes, when connected, form a cross. I forgot to mention that. This is God's cross. This is the cross of Jesus that he carries with him to his death, right here. Sagittarius. This is known as the cross of God's Son. The kingdom of heaven is Leo. So the starting party is Leo, whose ruling planet is the sun, the only sign that the sun rules over. The closest of these 4 points in chronological order is June 21st in Cancer. So this is where the gospel starts. This is the cusp handover date right here between Cancer and Leo. It's the beginning of the kingdom. Matthew 3:4. John's clothes were woven from coarse camel hair, and he wore a leather belt around his waist. For food, he ate locusts and wild honey. If we take the most famous drawing of a man, Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, and superimpose it onto the zodiac, we can make sense of this. And again, you don't have to use Vitruvian Man. You can use a stick figure. You could use Medusa. It doesn't matter. So check this out. We were in Leo. Now we're in Cancer. Why? Because the mouth of the head is in Cancer. The beehive cluster is in Cancer. So that's why he's eating the honey. I told you we get to this. Leviticus 11, what's clean and unclean to eat. All flying insects that walk on all fours are to be regarded as unclean by you. There are, however, some flying insects that walk on all fours that you may eat. Those that have jointed legs for hopping on the ground. Of these you may eat any kind of locust, so there it is, katydid, cricket, or grasshopper. So when they're trying to tell you in the media, a pound of grasshoppers is 3 times as nutrition as a pound of beef, and they're trying to get you to eat bugs, understand that it's from Leviticus 11. They're reading it from the Bible. That's where they're getting this idea from. Now, we were in Leo, and then we were in Cancer, right? The beehive cluster, the mouth, the honey. That's why he eats locusts and wild honey. Well, guess what? Gemini is here. That's a little lower on the body. So let's say it's like right here. Let's give that right there. That's a little lower on the body. It's a clothes made out of camel hair, or the constellation Camelopardalis, which is in Gemini. So we had Leo, Cancer, and Gemini now, but guess what? Now we're going to go to Taurus, because look at this. A little lower on his body, you'll get his midsection, which is where you would wear a belt. So look at the belt right here. If I just put a line from Taurus, this is the midsection right here. This is where he wears the belt. So here's the shirt, or here's the Camelopardalis camel clothing. Here's the wild honey right here, because he's eating the beehive cluster. And we started in Leo. So now we have 4 signs in a row that this started with. Taurus represents the bull and the female is the cow, which is where you would get the leather. Regarding the belt, Orion's belt sits between Taurus and Gemini. So we were here. This is where we started, right? The beginning of Leo. This is the first day of Leo. Next would be the baptism. Now, how are we going to go from the beginning of Leo to a water sign to signify the baptism? Well, that's easy. You just go across the zodiac. You follow the patterns, the connecting signs and the opposing signs. Now we're touching Aquarius, which is the man baptizing people, right? The man with the water pitcher in Aquarius is personified as John the Baptist with the water. It's important to note, too, that John the Baptist and Jesus are always 6 months apart. So when you think about it, Jesus is down here, right? December 25th, starting to rise a degree a day. That would mean that John the Baptist would be here June 24th, decreasing a degree a day. So as this goes up, so must this go down. Which is why in John 3:30, John says, he must increase, but I must decrease. And it's also why St. John's Day is exactly 6 months to the day of the birthday of Jesus. So the next story of Jesus is the temptation of Jesus. So we're going back here. July 24th, right? Well, what happens? He's tempted by Satan in the desert for 40 days. Well, this is July 24th. All you got to do is count 40 days, and that takes you to September 2nd. This is right in the middle of Virgo, the lady with the wheat stalk. So what's the very next passage? Matthew 4:3. If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread. Here we see mention of the bread, which tells you that the sun is in Leo. So we were in Leo.
You mean Virgo?
Then we were in Virgo, and then now we're going to be in Libra. Why? Matthew 5:17 and 22. What did I tell you Libra was, guys? I said it was olives, wine, and law. So what do you get? Matthew 5:17 and 22. I did not come to abolish the law. And if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. Both law and judgment are Libra. So we started in Cancer, and then we started in Leo, and we went this way, 4 signs. And now we're over here, 3 signs. So that's 7 signs in a row in order to make the story. What this is, well, I'll get to the slide and then I'll explain it. Matthew 7:15 and 16. Beware of false prophets who come disguised harmless as sheep. That's Aries. And can you pick grapes from the thorn bushes? The grapes are in Libra. That's an opposing sign. So moving along, Matthew 13, later that same day, Jesus left the house and sat beside the lake. So this is right here. This would be beside the lake right here, would be the cusp between Aquarius and Pisces. Why? Because it's between the 2 waters. Why? Because he said beside the lake. If he was in the lake or went swimming, they could have easily said Aquarius or Pisces, but because he's beside the lake, using the words that they use, he's right here. Now, look at how this works out. Because if he's right here, this opposing sign is Leo Virgo. So it's touching Virgo, so we can talk about Virgo, right? So what are the next parables? The wheat and the weeds, the mustard seed, and the yeast. What is the next parable? Well, if you just come all the way back over here to touch Pisces again, now you could talk about the fishing net parable. Gemini is the sign of 2 men, technically twins. However, there's just a short mention of brothers in the next passage. He's just the carpenter's son, and we know Mary, his mother, and his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, Jesus. This ends right here at the cusp of Gemini Cancer. Why? Because it's Gemini, because they were talking about the twins and the brothers, right? Well, if you follow this down to its opposing sign, that's the last day of Sagittarius. That's December 21st. And if you remember me explaining this to you, that means it's the day of death. What's the very next story? It's the death of John the Baptist. As I've mentioned before, death comes at the end of Sagittarius. So what you have to understand is what I've done is I've taken Ptolemy's list in 150 AD of the 48 constellations they knew at the time. I'm not using the 88 that we know now. I'm using the 48 at 150 AD, around the time that some of this stuff was written. And what you'll find is that using that simple keyword cipher, based on that, you can tell endless stories. Just as long as you follow the zodiac patterns and you follow the law that was written within it. Connecting patterns, opposing patterns. I'm going to show you an example right now of how scripture is written. This is not scripture, but I'm going to show you an example. Let's take the sentence, which sounds like it could be in the Bible, but isn't. If I say to you, the rulers were divided between war and love, it split the land in half. You could read that as a literal translation. Or, the ruling planet of Aries is Mars, who's the god of war. The ruling planet of Libra is Venus, who's the goddess of love. There is your war and love. If you connect it, it literally splits the land in half. And that's how scripture is written, guys. It's written with a keyword cipher. Matthew 14, 17, and 32, but we only have 5 loaves of bread. That's Virgo right here. The lady with the wheat stalk, the bread, the wheat, and 2 fish. Well, guess what? 2 fish are Pisces right here. These are opposing signs. This is the cross of God's son. We were just in Virgo, remember, which is right here. And now next is Libra, which is law and wine and oil, remember? What stories do we get now? The story of the temple tax, which is law, the unforgiving debtor, law, divorce and marriage, law, and the parable of the vineyard worker, wine. Also, Virgo and Libra are 2 connecting signs. Then you have Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio, because this is the betrayal now, which is where he betrays Jesus with the kiss. And then here's the death. So it closes with 4 signs. Astrology is a language. If you understand this language, the sky speaks to you. That's Dane Rudyard. And I understand this language. And I've been, for the last 5 years, going around podcasts, over 1,200 podcasts, over 300 shows, different shows, trying to teach people this, explain to them that it's not meant to be taken literally, that they're keeping you at your lowest form of spirituality if you take these holy texts literally, that they tell much bigger stories. So are you starting to see the great implication of this so far? If nothing else from what you guys watched from me today, because I know you guys are a tough crowd if you guys watch Chief Ironbush. Believe me or not, I realize that I got to bring it for you guys. All I want you to get out of this, aside from obviously recognizing the pattern, connecting signs, opposing signs, and starting to do this yourself, this means that at the very, very, very least, the Bible is not meant to be taken literally. Now, I'm going to read this to you again, and this is going to make more sense to you now. What is the point of this? We take for granted we have calendars, clocks, watches, weathermen. The ancients didn't have any of that. They had sundials. In the Bible, they worked on dream interpretations for harvest. They had to know things. They needed to know Taurus is when you put the plow on the bull as plant as above, so below. Because if you didn't see the bull and you didn't catch it in time, you're not going to have crops that year. You're going to starve at the end of the year. This tells you when winter's coming. This tells you when winter is coming, which was people always, the Game of Thrones, winter is coming. It was a big deal back then. Before we had like insulation, it was a big deal that winter was coming. You had to know when, because if you just woke up every day just nonchalantly, not following the signs in the heavens, you had no clue what was coming next. The Bible is an encoded farmer's almanac, and was the knowledge of staying alive the most important thing. They would look at the stars and see all this movement and make up stories about them and pass them down to their children, then them to their children, etc. Eventually, they learned how to write and wrote them down, and they evolved from Sumerian to Babylonian to Egyptian to Judaism in the Old Testament, then to Christians in the New Testament, then to the Quran, which we'll do in part 2. My point, once again, is not that those ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. So I'm going to show you a couple more things, and then we're going to pump the brakes on this.
Okay.
The U.S. was not founded as a Christian nation. Christianity is the most perverted system that ever shone on man. Thomas Jefferson. I have found Christian dogma unintelligible. That's Benjamin Franklin. This would be the best of all possible worlds if there were no religion in it. John Adams. The Constitution is the God which I will never abandon. George Washington. The United States was founded upon secular, not religious views. That's why they kept separation of church and state. I'm going to read you a couple more quotes. And the day will come when the mystical generation of Jesus, by the Supreme Being as his Father in the womb of a virgin, will be classed with the fable of the generation of Minerva in the brain of Jupiter. Thomas Jefferson in a letter to John Adams. What influence, in fact, have Christian ecclesiastical establishments had on civil society? In many instances, they have been upholding the thrones of political tyranny. In no instance have they been sent as the guardians of the liberties of the people. That's James Madison. The purpose of separation of church and state is to keep forever from these shores the ceaseless strife that has soaked the soil of Europe in blood for centuries. James Madison. This is my favorite quote, by the way. This is from Thomas Paine 250 years ago. 250 years ago, one of the founding fathers said this: the Christian religion is a parody on the worship of the sun, in which they place a man called Christ in the place of the sun and pay him the adoration originally paid to the sun. Now, how did they know this 250 years ago? Because we've been getting dumber. Now, let me just show you a couple of things about how they use it against us. They always crash the stock market in Libra, always. The Panic of 1907, October 1907. Teddy Roosevelt, Republican. Wall Street crash of 1929, October 24th, 1929. That's the handover date to Scorpio. Herbert Hoover, Republican. Black Monday, October 19th, 1987. Ronald Reagan, Republican. The Friday the 14th mini crash, October 13th, 1989. George H.W. Bush, Republican. Stock market downturn of 2002, October 9th, 2002. George W. Bush, Republican. 10% in most of the world's indices dropped. Crash. Handover date to Scorpio, October 24th, 2008. George W. Bush, Republican. What they do is they crash it in Libra. Why do they crash it in Libra? Because Libra is the judge. We're being judged. That's what it is. We're being judged and we're being sentenced. We're being sentenced to having less money in our 401k and all that good stuff. It's always during a Republican, and it's always in October. Always. In Libra. Now, the Roman Catholic Catechism 2116. All forms of divination are to be rejected, recourse to Satan or demons, conjuring up the dead or other practices falsely supposed to unveil the future, consulting horoscopes, astrology, palm reading, interpretations of omens and lots, the phenomena of clairvoyance, and recourse to mediums. All conceal a desire for power over time, history, and in the last analysis, other human beings, as well as a wish to conciliate hidden powers. They contradict the honor, respect, and loving fear that we owe to God alone. So why would the Catholic Church, if I just showed you all this astrology in the Bible, why would they say astrology is evil? Because they want to keep you at your lowest form. They want to keep you in your, spiritually, they want to keep you in your root chakra. That's what they're trying to do. Now, this movie right here, Face Off, remember this movie?
Mm-hmm.
John Travolta, Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage and his brother, their names in the movie, you can look this up on IMDb, Castor and Pollux Troy. That's Gemini. Well, who's John Travolta? Well, he's Sean Archer. Archer is Sagittarius. Guess what? Those are opposing signs. So they use this in movies. They use this in music. Here's another example. There are a ton of characters in Harry Potter that are named after the stars or constellations. You have Draco Malfoy. Draco's the dragon. Pollux Black, Sirius Black, Andromeda Black, Regulus Black, Arcturus Black, Cassiopeia Black, Orion Black, and Cygnus Black. Algol. Algol is a demon star. It's fixed in Taurus, by the way. It has a long history of evil attached in it. That's more for astrology readings. That's when you get an astrologer and they get your birth chart and then they show you what it is. In Batman Begins, the evil character's name is literally Ra's al Ghul, who gets his name from Al Ghul or Al Ghul. You remember this video, Zombie?
Mm-hmm.
1990 song video for the Cranberries, Zombie. Here's Dolores O'Riordan. Is painted gold like the sun, and her head dressing represents the rays of the sun, much like Jesus in the crown of thorns. Well, if you look at the next scene after she's singing right here, you'll see the sun on the cross, and you'll see the bow and arrow right here. This is Sagittarius waiting to take her out, waiting to kill the sun on the cross. But it's not just the Bible. If you don't know by now the Bible is not original, you still might have doubts. Here is 6,000 years of ancient holy texts going from 5 Sumerian tablets, the Babylonian Enuma Elish, the Code of Hammurabi, which is where the Jews get their punishment and code of ethics from, to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, to the Gnostic texts, all of them, to the Quran, the Book of Mormon. I'm still working on the Apocrypha, the Ethiopian Bible, and the Colburn Bible, but they're all the same. And this is where I think we should pause. I wanted to get that last bit in there to show you that they use it against us.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've basically figured out, and that's basically the first half of this presentation. So now that we've done it one-on-one, what do you think?
Lot to think about there. It's very good. I very much appreciate your work, and I've personally never read the Bible cover to cover. I've tried a few times. I've read a lot of the pieces, and I've studied under people such as Santos Bonacci and Jordan Maxwell. I never interacted with them directly. Santos,
I taught for Santos at a syncretism school when he had it.
you did what? I didn't hear that.
I taught for Santos. He had a syncretism school.
Right.
I was one of his astrotheology teachers.
Oh, you taught. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I thought you said you fought.
Mm.
Actually, somebody who was connected to Santos introduced me to him, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. It was before Jordan died, and I had wanted to connect to Jordan. There's a lot of my work in law and what I've decoded in law and related things very much is complementary and is actually taking Jordan's work to levels above that or beyond that. Um, but Santos tried to link me up with Jordan, and it didn't work. Jordan never got back to me, and then very soon, not too long after that, is when he passed away.
Mhm.
but my work has integrated all of this, not necessarily all of it, because it's always unfolding and unveiling, as the chief always says. It's all unveiling, not revelation, which is reveiling. Um, but I've integrated a lot of the pieces of the Bible to how law is fundamentally constructed, which we won't go into here. You mentioned before we started recording that you hadn't really had any time yet to look at our work, which I would like to.
I have two of my really good friends, Carrie and Priscilla.
Mhm.
Actually, Priscilla's my astrologer. They're heavy into that. They've been they've been taking classes with some guy named Mansa for a while, and then something happened, and then they're the ones that are telling me that one of my friends actually had a tax lien of like 115,000 completely dismissed because she's like, well, there's three ways that you put me on the payroll, and you guys don't have any authority 10 miles outside of Washington, D.C. That's in the Constitution. That's one. I'm not in the military. That's two. So how did you guys do this? And they dropped it for lack of jurisdiction.
Mhm. How long ago was that?
A few years.
Yeah.
A
Uh,
good year.
yeah. Well, I started studying law in 1989, 90, 91, thereabouts.
But
So
that's what Jordan used to say. Jordan used to tell me all the time.
what's that?
He used to tell me lawyers are not taught law. They're taught procedure. They're not
Yeah.
actually taught law.
Yeah. Well, they're taught code and code enforcement, and basically they're attorneys, which means literally to turn, and they turn one in to basically being wards of the court, wards of the state, and the processing of what people call law is a processing of the codes and the penal sum
You
attachments.
remember watching one of Santos's videos, and he talked about the fact that I think the prosecutor has to bring a checkbook to there. Have you heard of that?
I haven't heard that, but uh, any attorney who's a member of the bar, which they all are, every year in their bar association, whether it's whatever state they're in, and I'm sure it's the same in other countries, they have to take out a bond every year. And when they take on a client signs a contract with them, they actually can use that bond to issue a letter of credit. Because basically, all that the civil procedure and court procedure, which is all civil based on civil code, is a commercial and a monetary process of transaction. So, civil law is based on the containment of the body politic of a conquered nation or country or territory, and basically the people and the persons and the property of the conquered territory are put into a management system, which is basically called Roman civil law. And Rome,
I've seen another thing where a guy was brought. They recorded this. A guy was brought into court, and he never gave up his straw man's name. They asked him his name, and he said, "I'm John," and they were like, "John who?" And he was like, "Just John is fine." And then
Mhm.
like he got into an argument with them, and then the judge eventually stood up and bowed and called recess and
Yeah,
left.
I've
It
seen
was,
that video. Yeah.
what do you think of
Um,
that?
well, what you mentioned your friend and what she did with the IRS and what you're talking about there, they are victories in limited battles, individual situations that people learn something, but they're not as deep and comprehensive of the full understanding of how all of it fits together. The legal construct with the codes, the function of military conquest, which is Roman civil law, how Roman civil code is brought onto the land because Roman civil code is a maritime function, and maritime law has no place on the land, but that's part of the bait and switch, or the technicality of what they did over hundreds and thousands of years, and essentially it gets down to the monetary function, because um, the implementation of full civil rules Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, California Code of Procedure, Civil Code, and all the rest of it, Code of Taxation and Revenue, all these myriad of codes. They're all based on Roman Civil Code, which is a function of bankruptcy. When
Mhm.
an entity is put into bankruptcy and it is marshaled or sequestered as to its collateral to satisfy the protection of the creditor, then admiralty rules come in. That's part of how they bring the maritime admiralty law onto the land. So there's a lot of urban myths, patriot myths, so-called law and freedom movement myths.
What is the channel that teaches all this stuff?
Well, the best channel is Freedom Absolute and
That's what
Pantera
I'm
Vita.
asking as
Oh,
well.
okay. Um, well, yeah. So we're Freedom Absolute. That's just a new iteration of the work we've been doing for over 3 decades.
So if I wanted to send my friends Carrie and Priscilla over to you, what would be the best way?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Freedom Absolute on YouTube. It's on Rumble, but there's not much going on there. So and we've got a Substack and a Patreon page connected to Freedom Absolute. And the best thing to do, well, they may not want to watch your presentation again, but at the bottom of this presentation, I assume they've watched it probably
So
more
many
than
times.
once, more than once. Um, you
Well,
know,
I'm always evolving it. I'm always
yeah.
putting a little bit more, taking something out, putting some more stuff in.
Right. So just tell them to go to the end of the presentation during this conversation we're having, and we'll in YouTube and Substack we have all of our websites, gem.university, which is where the university is, panteravita.org, ptvcourt.org, because as I said in the beginning, a society, whether public or private, does have the capacity to establish its own jurisdiction, its own law form, its court, its treasury, its monetary issue. And that's what we've been building for several decades. So we have been building our law form and our court that has to do with how to maintain and control the law. And basically our education teaches all levels of law because there are people, as I'm sure you know, who are out there saying, well, common law is it, or equity is it, or you need to know commercial law or one or the other. If you don't know all of the jurisdictional forms of law and how they intersect and how they are used, because if you go into a courtroom and you think you're in common law, or you think you're in commercial law, or you think you're in admiralty, you don't know when the judge or the prosecutor is shifting from one
Well,
law
usually
form
the
to
judge
the other.
usually the judge will um, cause a recess, right? He'll call a recess, and then that's usually when they flip it from one to the other, or is it
Yeah,
more
if
than
there's somebody who knows what they're doing and they challenge it at one level, the judge will leave, come back, he'll establish a second level, and come back in the third level. Ultimately, the underlying law that they are using is Talmudic law. They're following the Talmud and basically all of the esoteric levels of the Old Testament and what people would call the basis of Judaic law, which is a misnomer. There's no such thing in those times as Jews and all of that. You mentioned Sumer and Egypt, Babylon, and all of that pre-Roman. These are things that I've delved into very deeply. And as you know, and many, many people watching, it's both an evolution from Sumerian to Egyptian, Babylonian, and so forth, and it's also a restatement of each epoch. They're restating it. They're giving new names to the so-called gods and goddesses, but it's the same thing. And this is where your work comes in because
it's the same
essentially,
story?
yeah, and essentially, as you know from the Chief's work, we are in a containment field.
Mhm.
And so as it's reflected, as above, so below. reflected in the canopy or the panoply of the stars and the planets and the heavens and the constructions that you go through with the 12 houses. But there's a direct complementary or mirroring reflection in how the law is constructed. And this is what we teach. And we teach it quite comprehensively, both in the symbolic form and the literal form, and how to actually really know where you're standing, whether you go into court or you don't go to court. And so
Would you be able to DM me some links on Instagram?
send you some links. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that I can
Um,
share.
sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I personally don't go on any of those. I don't go on Instagram or Facebook. I have an X account that I look at very occasionally. I primarily stay away from all that, but we have various teams that are developing our publicity and media and interface and interaction through social media. So I'll have them go on our Instagram for Freedom Absolute, and we'll do that. And we'll connect to you.
Or you have my blessing to share whatever we record wherever you feel necessary.
Yeah, well, it'll be on our Substack. It'll be on Freedom Absolute on YouTube and Rumble, and it'll be on the public side. It's not going to be on the paid subscription side. But there are other levels, deeper levels, which as we go on in building our relationship and our dialogue together, that I can bring into the conversation, deeper levels of the Bible, where you presented those 7 points. It's metaphysical, it's astrological, it's analytical, anatomical, and so forth. As it relates to the law, it is also commercial, it is also equity, it is also within admiralty. They're all interconnected. And, I did a seminar 14 years ago, and it's called How It All Fits Together. And that's really a theme that I've been working with and presenting for since that time and integrating all of these levels. How does it fit together? How can we use our the precision of our actual awareness, not our consciousness, because consciousness is a very misused, misapplied term. Basically, we are in a containment field that the mind control is a part of what we call the mind consciousness system. So all of these symbolic structures, they are mental, like we can go through everything you've just presented and see the precision of using the numerical, the numerology. You mentioned that you only touched on one numerological thing, that 265 over 153. But as you know, there's vast amounts of numerological constructs that are reflective and complementary with the symbolic and with the anatomical, and is also with law as far as the layers, commerce, equity, maritime, and the rest of it. So what we do is we open all that up. We focus on the study of law, monetary systems, monetary constructs, and where that fits in the historical sweep through time sequentially. And for me, in my work and what I bring forth for people to look at is the study of law is actually the true decoder ring. It's the thing that unlocks, it's the key of all the rest of it, because the law form and the flip side of the same coin, which is the monetary system, is how the bondage is attached to the physical body, to the living flesh, our genetics, and living, breathing substance of who we really are. Because
Mhm.
what we're dealing with all of these very advanced mental intellectual constructions is essentially the mechanism to get people to voluntarily consent to the literal, legal, and monetary attachment to who we really are, because it's a parasitic system. That's, as you know, what the chief talks about all the time. It's something I've talked about for decades. that we're in a containment field, a parasitic system, and it's feeding off of our literal life force because the parasite is not self-generating. It has attempted to control the feminine principle, which is regenerative, and impose and overlay the patriarchal, which is essentially mental, and using all of these constructs that we've talked about here to suppress and contain the living substance of source-connected beings, because without us, they can't survive. And then as Chief's work, I don't know how much you've watched of his other videos besides your work with him. He's one of the most advanced of presenting the esoteric and the all of the constructions. And he does talk about law a little bit, but he doesn't understand it to the depths of what I could bring forward. And I really look forward to being able to have a interaction and dialogue with him, because there's more layers of the depth of the law and the attachment and the energetic attachment than he knows it in his essence, but he doesn't know quite the detail. Like recently, he put on a video. I think it's like 12, 13 minutes of some woman reading off of something. She doesn't quote it, cite it what it is, but she's going through 1871, what happened there with the formation of the District of Columbia and the corporation. And she mentioned civil law. But there's a lot more detail that she doesn't talk about. I don't think she knows about, and the chief doesn't. And so, the bottom line is the parasitic attachment to living source-connected beings. That's the theme of the chief's work. It's the theme of our work, and truly understanding the mechanics of law and the monetary system and the historical context, and then bringing in your work with the symbology, because what the foundational thing that we bring forward in what we teach and so forth is that we are free will, sovereign free will beings. We have absolute sovereign free will. Nothing can attach to us unless we consent to it by the agreement that we would call a contract. And so when you really understand the full spectrum of how the legal system has been set up and how it works, the total function is to get people to voluntarily consent. It may be through significant pressure or manipulation or whatever, but we have the power because they cannot attach to us unless we contract with them, unless we assert our voluntary consent and our sovereign free will to enter into those contracts. And so all of the elements of like your teaching, the astrology, the symbology, and all the rest of it are energetic functions to get us to induce the attachments that are behind the symbols. Because what you've just walked through is how the zodiac and the planetary structures and the constellations are literally astrotheologically laid out in the Bible, and obviously others like the Quran, the Vedics, and all the rest of that. But there are energetics behind that. Those energetics are to attach to us at subconscious and unconscious levels. So we literally induce it, or it's an induction, using that word very specifically, to bring it into the layers of our being, into the layers of the flesh, into our levels where we are not attuned or aligned with who we really are. And they have literal energetic functions that are directly cognizable in the law and in the monetary systems and so forth. Because before there was language, before there's etymology, you mentioned gematria, the numerics and the mathematics and the etymology. Before that, before letters and numbers in symbol form, were whole image inductive ideograms or images, or let's just leave it at that, that were,
So would you like me to, have you spoken to Chief Ironbush?
no, no,
Would you
we,
like me to introduce you?
yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
And
I'll reach out to him. I have to run right now though because my
sure,
back is absolutely killing me. But
okay.
DM me some of the links
Hmm.
and give me your email address. I'll see if I can set something up.
Okay, that'd be great. Okay.
Well, I
Um,
appreciate all this. Then this was great, and let's do something. Let's do something soon.
okay. We'll be in touch. We'll let you know. Okay. All
Thanks.
right. Well,
Bye.
thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.